The air in the Fresnel lens room tasted of ozone, hot glass, and machine oil, a clean mechanical scent that Elias cherished. It was a sterile barrier against the outside, against the chaos of the salt-laced wind that screamed its tireless warnings around the stone column of the Isle of the Lost Light. Below, the Atlantic was not a gentle expanse, but a living, hungry thing, its ceaseless roar the only constant in her new life. Elias ran a white cloth over the precise geometry of the brass gears, her movements economical and practiced. She had become the geometry of her environment, rigid, functional, and deeply isolated. She had taken the posting 6 months ago, shedding her old life like a too-tight skin, the demanding career, the relentless city noise, and the memory of the mistake that had cost her everything. This remote sentry post was her penance and her sanctuary. She worked to the metronome of the light. Click, sweep, click, sweep. The beam was her purpose, the only thing she allowed herself to care for. It was a simple mathematical duty. Keep the light burning. Nothing messy, nothing emotional. She paused, looking out at the vast, monochrome stretch of the evening sea. It was a perfect, self-imposed exile, yet lately the silence felt less like freedom and more like a vacuum. Solitude, she thought, polishing a lens facet until it gleamed. People call it freedom, the chance to finally hear yourself think. But what if the voice you hear is the one you came here to escape? She wiped a bead of sweat from her temple, a ghost of a memory flickering in the corner of her mind, a shouted accusation, the screech of tires, the final, agonizing quiet. She pressed the memory down, hard, the way she might tighten a stubborn bolt. Solitude was not freedom. It was imprisonment without witnesses. It ensured she could do no more harm, but it also guaranteed no one would ever truly see her again. Tonight the wind was particularly aggressive, vibrating the very stone of the tower. Elias descended the helical staircase, her hand trailing over the worn iron railing. In the galley, she ate a meager meal, listening to the Coast Guard radio chatter, static and routine traffic. Nothing, as it should be. She checked the exterior instruments one last time before bedding down. The wind speed was high, the visibility dropping, and the barometer steady. She signed the log with her precise, unwavering hand, the ink bleeding slightly into the damp page. Then it happened. It wasn't a sound of the storm, nor the groan of the tower. It was a foghorn. But it was wrong. Too low, too resonant, carrying a strange, mournful cadence she had never heard on any modern vessel. Her internal log, her trained ear, told her it was a triple blast, but her official instruments, the omnidirectional microphone, the fog detector, registered nothing but the storm's white noise. She raced back up to the lantern room, scanning the dark water with binoculars. Empty. Only the whitecaps and the blinding sweep of her own light. The foghorn did not sound again. As she stood there, cold dread replacing her usual detachment, the lighthouse beam itself stuttered. Not a mechanical failure, the power was steady, the gears turning, but the light itself, the colossal 1,000-watt heart of the tower, seemed to dim just for a beat, as if something vast and cold had passed directly through it. Elias lowered the binoculars, her breath catching in her throat. She, the professional, the pragmatist, was staring at an impossible event. She gripped the brass railing, forcing her pulse to slow. "Electrical fluctuation," she whispered, her voice too loud in the sudden eerie silence between the wind gusts. But she knew that wasn't true. She went to the radio, half intending to report a technical fault, then stopped. What would she say? My light dimmed because a ghostly ship passed through it. She logged the anomaly, a single cryptic note. Transient low-frequency acoustic event. Source unknown. She stared out the glass, her reflection hazy in the lamplight, her expression guarded. The foghorn sound had been lonely, yes, but it carried an intimacy that chilled her more than the sea spray. It was a plea, a warning, or perhaps even a recognition. Elias watched the Black Sea, her isolation feeling suddenly thin, permeable. It was a lonely sound, but it wasn't mine. The low-frequency acoustic event had kept Elias awake long past her usual time. The logical part of her brain cycled through probabilities, rare weather phenomenon, distant military exercise, or a failure in her sensor calibration. The other part, the quiet, submerged part she kept caged, suggested something darker. By morning, the storm had broken, leaving behind a sky of scrubbed blue and a shoreline cluttered with flotsam. As Elias performed her routine beach patrol, her eye caught an object wedged between two tide-smoothed boulders. It was a piece of carved wood, dark as obsidian, about the length of her forearm. She pulled it free. It wasn't driftwood, it was a fragment of something deliberately crafted. It was the stylized wing of a bird, or maybe a mermaid, cut with a fluid, baroque artistry that defied the crude lines of modern seafaring. The wood was impossibly dense and felt cold, not merely from the water, but with an intrinsic, bone-deep chill. Its edges were sharp, suggesting it hadn't tumbled in the surf for long. It looked ancient, yet inexplicably fresh. Elias was placing the fragment in a specimen box when the drone of an approaching engine interrupted the rhythm of the waves. A small, rugged supply boat, unauthorized and unannounced, was pulling up to the main landing dock. A woman stepped off the boat with the sure-footed grace of someone born to a deck. She was tall, dressed in canvas and worn leather, and carried a bulky satchel that looked more like a geologist's kit than a tourist's bag. This was Vera. Her eyes, a startling deep gray, were already sweeping the cliffs, hungry and focused, instantly locking onto the lighthouse keeper. "Elias? Keeper?" Vera called out, her voice clear and strong over the residual surf. She didn't wait for a reply, striding up the path toward the tower. Elias met her at the base, crossing her arms, a gesture of ownership and defense. "You're off schedule and unannounced. This is a restricted Coast Guard area. You need to identify yourself." Vera didn't break stride. She stopped 2 feet away, her gaze going straight past Elias to the wooden fragment held loosely in the keeper's hand. "I'm Vera Alaric, marine historian and, yes, slightly obsessive amateur salvage specialist. I was tracking the movement of a low-pressure system last night. It coincided with an old legend. I saw the debris field on the satellite imaging this morning. That piece of wood. Let me see it." Elias tightened her grip. "This is my station." I logged the find. "The Coast Guard is aware. You'll need to leave. I can radio for a pickup." Vera scoffed, a quick, dismissive sound that was entirely devoid of malice, only impatience. "The Coast Guard will log it as unidentified debris. They'll burn it or toss it. They don't see the story in it. They don't see the impossibility." She tilted her head, her intensity pinning Elias in place. "That piece of wood is from a ship that shouldn't exist. Now, let me rephrase my request. I need to see it, Keeper, because I think it's older than wood. It's something preserved by intent, not by ocean." Elias hesitated. The way Vera said impossibility echoed her own unsettled night. She found herself reacting not to Vera's demands, but to her conviction. "What are you talking about?" "The vagrant's heart," Vera said, her voice dropping to a near-reverent whisper. "A galleon lost in 1799. Legend says she was captained by a woman who sailed her into a storm, not to sink, but to escape a terrible choice. They say she appears before a great storm, but no debris ever washes ashore. It's a ghost, a perfect illusion. Except for this. And this," Vera pointed a gloved finger at Elias's hand. "This is proof that the ghost is real, and the ghost is bleeding into our world. Their initial argument was a dance of defense and aggression. Elias was defending her isolation, her need for clinical control. Vera was aggressively seeking validation for a life spent chasing shadows. "I came here for quiet," Elias stated, looking away toward the roaring sea. "I don't deal in legends, Miss Alaric. I deal in light." Vera's tone softened slightly, gaining its expensive edge. It was a sudden cut through the noise, revealing the hidden motive. "You deal in light to keep the dark out, Elias. I deal in the dark to find the light I lost. That's what this ship is, a tragedy trapped between two worlds, and if it's appearing, it's looking for someone. Maybe the woman who cursed it, or maybe the one who can break the curse." She stepped closer. "The captain of that ship was my great-great-great-aunt. She was erased from the family history, branded a traitor. I've been looking for the truth of her sacrifice my whole life." Elias felt a sharp pang of empathy, not for the legend but for the loss. A shared, profound connection to the ruthless indifference of the sea suddenly bound them. Elias feared the ocean's depth. Vera revered the potential for answers hidden within it. "The weather is turning," Vera said, gesturing toward the rapidly darkening horizon. "You can't send me back now." "I'm a professional, Elias. I won't interfere with your light, but I have files, charts, and a key piece of information that links that foghorn you heard last night to the vagrant's heart." Elias looked at the fragment in her hand, then at the intense, sincere face of the historian. The thought of being left alone again with the impossible sound was suddenly intolerable. "Stay until the next supply drop," Elias conceded, the words feeling heavy and definitive. She wasn't just letting a historian in, she was allowing a witness to her instability. Vera didn't smile, only nodded, her eyes bright with victory. "Thank you. I won't require a rescue keeper. I'm not leaving. And deep down, you know I'm the only person in the world who won't think you're crazy when you tell them what you really saw." The lighthouse galley, normally a fortress of routine, was transformed. Charts covered the table, illuminated by the focused beam of Elias's task light, their precise nautical markings warring with the Baroque scripts of Vera's historical documents. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and lukewarm coffee. Vera had a collection of documents, old shipping manifests, parish records, and a tattered, water-stained volume bound in leather. "This," Vera declared, running a reverent finger over the cover, "is Captain Alara Vance's private journal. It was found years ago, hidden in a family vault, but only the last few cryptic entries remain legible." Elias peered over her shoulder, her natural skepticism battling a growing sense of urgency. The journal was proof. The vagrant's heart was not mere folklore. She tried to maintain her distance, focusing on the factual. "What does it say about the wreck? Weather, location?" "Nothing about sinking," Vera replied, her voice hushed. "Only about a choice." "Listen to this," Vera read aloud, translating the archaic hand. "The oath is broken, not by my will, but by my fear of losing what little remains. Let the storm take my heart, for I have chosen the harbor of the damned over the open sea of true loyalty. I cannot let them find her. I cannot let them destroy the only innocence left in this cruel world." Elias processed the words clinically. "The oath suggests she was beholden to someone, a trade pact, a government commission, and the her, a person, a passenger, cargo." "A person," Vera confirmed, closing the journal. "The town archives hinted Ilara had a young ward aboard, a girl she was trying to get to the New World. The betrayal wasn't of a flag or a country. It was of her first mate who wanted to use the girl as collateral for a smuggling operation. Ilara sailed the ship directly into a squall, sacrificing the vessel and her crew to protect that child." Elias walked to the window, watching a solitary gull circle the tower. A betrayal motivated by protection, she mused. Sacrifice is messy. It looks like betrayal to everyone who doesn't know the stakes. Vera watched her closely. You sound like you understand that kind of messy sacrifice, Elias. The kind that leaves you isolated, holding the burden. Elias stiffened, her shell immediately reforming. I understand data. Elara chose a final, dramatic end to avoid a drawn-out, painful one. Rational, if extreme. It wasn't just rational, Vera pressed gently. It was love. A profound, self-destructive love that left the ghost ship cursed to repeat the storm that took her. That's what a curse is, Elias. The inability to let go of a painful moment. The moment of shared vulnerability cracked Elias's reserve. She turned back, her eyes meeting Vera's for a fleeting second. I know what it's like to make a choice, a bad choice, that costs you everything. The kind of choice you have to live with every day, wishing you'd simply been swallowed by the sea instead. The words were quiet, but carried the weight of years of silence. She had lost someone too, but had not been granted the sea's erasure. Vera accepted the admission with a solemn nod, neither pushing for detail nor offering platitudes. Then we understand the captain. Now, let's understand the curse. They pored over the nautical charts. Vera had cross-referenced the journal's mentions of celestial bodies with historical weather data. The discovery was crucial. The ship doesn't appear during just any storm, Vera explained, tapping a faded entry. It appears during the spring ebb tide, when the water level drops low enough to reveal the true depth of the rock formations around the island, and only during a specific, recurring magnetic anomaly. Look, she pointed to a set of coordinates. The ship will appear closest to the lighthouse at 3 o'clock hours on Friday morning. It is seeking resolution at its point of loss, Elias whispered, a true keeper's understanding of the sea's logic surfacing. She looked out at the churning, white-capped water. We know when it's coming. Now we need to know why. The 3 days passed in a fever of preparation, marked by the escalating intensity of the sea and the rising tension between the two women. Elias meticulously checked the lighthouse's reserve power, the foghorn's integrity, and the structural supports. Vera, meanwhile, prepared historical recording equipment, a desperate hope to capture evidence. At 2:45 on Friday morning, the lighthouse was a fortress against a tempest. The wind hammered the tower, and the sea below was a chaos of boiling foam. The low-frequency acoustic event was now constant, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated the soles of their feet, even in the tower's upper chamber. 15 minutes, Elias murmured, gripping the brass control panel. Her face was pale, but her hands were steady, a professional masking deep fear. It's the ebb tide. The rocks are exposed, and the magnetic field is spiking, Vera confirmed, her eyes glued to a small, whirring compass that was spinning wildly. She wasn't afraid. She was transcendent. The light swept its arc. Click, sweep. Elias's heart beat in sync with the mechanism, her internal dialogue now purely professional. Protect the light. Guide the lost. At 3 o'clock, the hum outside intensified, becoming a sorrowful song. The temperature in the lantern room dropped suddenly, a shocking damp cold that smelled faintly of old spice and damp carnations. The physical trace Vera's legend suggested. Then she was there, the vagrant's heart. She materialized not from the mist, but through it, a towering, impossibly silent galleon of the late 18th century. Her sails were intact but colorless, gray as ash, billowing on a wind that didn't seem to touch the surrounding waves. Her wooden hull was pale, translucent, revealing the faint, skeletal structure of the decks within. It was terrifying, majestic, and heartbreakingly mournful. Elias stared, the reality eclipsing the legend. "She's not a reflection," she breathed, her voice clipped and tight with professional horror. "She's a distortion. She's real, but in the wrong frequency. She's a ship that never finished her journey," Vera whispered, tears pooling in her eyes. She reached out, her hand pressing against the glass. "Captain Elara Vance. She's stuck in the moment of her last despair." A spectral figure stood at the high helm, barely visible, a woman with her hair loose and face fixed toward the light, an expression of profound, endless grief etched upon her features. The ship, impossibly, began to drift straight toward the tower's sheer cliffs. "She'll be wrecked again," Elias shouted, adrenaline snapping her back into her duty. "If she sinks here, real or not, the phantom wreckage will destroy the structural integrity of the base." Her professional instinct to protect the light flared. She grabbed the manual foghorn lever, intending to blast a warning, a desperate keeper's attempt to deter a ghost. Vera grabbed her arm, her strength surprising. "No, don't send her away. She's coming to the light. She's not seeking a wreck. She's seeking an answer." "We have to find out what." "Elias. This is my station. I guide the vessels. I prevent disaster. You want to commune with the phantom. I want to keep the light burning." "Vera, and what if keeping the light burning means finally guiding this lost soul home? What if her answer is the light? We have to reach out, Elias, not warn her away. Please trust the legend more than the charts, just for a moment." The ship was terrifyingly close, the scent of carnations overwhelming the smell of salt. Elias looked from the ghostly hull to Vera's desperate face, seeing not a fanatic, but a woman standing on the edge of her own history. Fear forced her reliance on Vera's spiritual knowledge. Elias hesitated, dropping her hand from the lever. "What do we do?" she asked, the submission to the unknown a profound admission. Vera pulled out a large copper plate, a relic she'd brought. "She needs to know her sacrifice mattered. We need to leave a trace, something real for the unreal to cling to." As the ship reached its closest point, a spectral jib boom hanging mere feet from the glass of the lantern room, the temperature dropped further, a deep, silent magnetic pulse shaking the tower. The lighthouse beam, without mechanical reason, flickered again, then steadied, shining through the phantom ship's stern, illuminating it for a fraction of a second, like a photograph. And then, with the speed of a dream dissolving, the vagrant's heart was gone, leaving only the screaming wind and the distinct, impossible scent of damp carnations that lingered even after the tower's heat came back on. The aftermath was exhaustion and disbelief. Elias had documented the incident with meticulous notes and photographs of the magnetic anomaly readings. Vera sat slumped, clutching the journal, her initial euphoria replaced by a deep melancholy. "She's trapped," Vera murmured. "The curse isn't the haunting. It's the unanswered question. She wants to know if the girl lived. She wants resolution for the betrayal she suffered." They sat in silence until Elias, finally retrieving the wooden fragment, examined it under the harsh desk lamp. This piece of the ship, it had to come from somewhere specific. "The carving is too refined for a deck plank. It's part of the ship's nameplate or a coat of arms." Vera, energized by the physical evidence, pointed to a small, intricate symbol carved near the break, a circle intersected by a wave and two stylized anchors. "That's the Vance family crest, adopted by Captain Elara. Look closer." Elias leaned in, her keeper's eye for detail taking over. There was a faint, nearly invisible line bisecting the anchor on the right. A crack. No, a score mark. "It's not a mark of damage, Elias. It's a message," Vera insisted. "A navigational mark. It means latitude and loss. It was used by secret societies of female captains to mark hidden caches on their home ports. It requires an outsider's expertise to decipher. Vera. Ilara Vance sailed with a secret, a woman in a man's profession, protecting an orphan. Her first mate, a man named Corvin, betrayed her to the authorities because he couldn't tolerate her success and her choices. It was a failure of trust between partners. Elias. Trust is a calculated risk. Corvin miscalculated. Ilara made a choice to sink the ship rather than risk the life of the girl, her ward. She chose a dramatic, immediate end to avoid a drawn-out sacrifice. That is not betrayal. It is control. Vera. But look at us, Elias. We are two women, alone on an island, tied together by a terrible secret and a terrifying ghost. We are both running from a past that involves a failure of trust. You chose isolation because trusting people cost you. I chose this quest because trusting my family's version of the past cost me the truth. Vera's words hit their mark. Elias's past, the reason she was trapped here, was a profound, irrecoverable failure of trust, a professional and personal betrayal that led to a tragic accident. She saw her fear mirrored in Ilara's desperate final act. She was repeating the ghost's tragedy, running from pain by attempting to control her environment. Elias. My past is logged, catalogued, and sealed off. I'm not running from trust. I'm acknowledging its cost. And it is too high. Vera. And that's why you're here, alone, fighting a battle that happened 200 years ago. Because the curse on the vagrant's heart isn't just about the ship. It's about the risk of choosing love over safety. Ilara chose love and paid for it with her life. What are you paying, Elias, to choose safety? The nautical symbol, Elias stated, changing the subject sharply, her trauma too raw for confrontation. The mark means latitude and loss. It's a geographic cipher. It doesn't tell us where the cache is, only that it's linked to the island. We need an outsider's help to break a cipher that old, a rare book dealer, a specialized archivist. And that means leaving the island. The journey to the nearest port town felt like a descent from one reality into a less honest one. Elias, dressed in civilian clothes for the first time in months, felt exposed and awkward. Vera, by contrast, blended easily, her canvas clothing and intense curiosity making her seem like a typical seaside researcher. They located a dusty, labyrinthine antiquarian bookstore. The proprietor, a man named Silas, was a local legend, a gaunt man with a mind full of coastal lore and a disturbing number of historical texts on privateers and shipwrecks. Vera, using her historian credentials, presented the sketch of the cryptic Vance crest. Silas peered at it through thick spectacles. Ah, the captain's compass. That's a Women of the Western Passage mark, a cipher for a location. Rare, very rare. Vera. It's a latitude-based calculation. We need the original context, a logbook, maybe a ship's deed, to translate it to a physical location on the Isle of the Lost Light. Silas's eyes, sharp and knowing, darted from Vera to Elias. He didn't ask why they were interested in the Isle's history. He simply stated, the true owners of the Isle don't like strangers digging up their secrets. The sea keeps what it wants. And this mark, it's not just a location. It marks a tomb, the final resting place of what Ilara Vance saved. He then showed them an old brittle map of the Isle. Printed faintly on the margin was the same cipher, overlaid with 3 words, below the high mark. Before they could press Silas for more, a heavy-set woman, Mrs. Thorne, entered the shop. She was clearly a pillar of the community, a descendant of the town's original founders, and she carried the chilling air of someone who guarded secrets fiercely. Keep her, Mrs. Thorne said, her voice a low, hostile drone, addressing Elias. I understood your assignment was isolation. No visitors, no historians digging up things that are best left to the tides. Elias felt the immediate, crushing weight of her uniform and her duty. She was supposed to be the gatekeeper, the enforcer of boundaries. Vera, recognizing the danger to their mission, tried to interject. "We're simply cataloging damage from the recent storm, ma'am." "Debris is my field," Vera began. Elias cut her off, the lie forming instantly and instinctively. It was a smooth, professional deception, born of years of hiding truth in bureaucratic language. "Elias, Miss Alaric is my Coast Guard-approved historical consultant. She's documenting the structural history of the tower's foundation, verifying the integrity of the oldest sections against the high tides. She requires local records that I, as the keeper, must facilitate." Mrs. Thorne narrowed her eyes. "I see. A consultant. Don't consult too deeply, keeper. Some things the sea takes, the land should not be asked to give back." She turned and left, the silence she left behind louder than her disapproval. Elias stared after her, her hands shaking slightly. "I just jeopardized my posting," she whispered, "for a story, for a ghost ship." "Vera, you lied to protect the mission, Elias, and to protect me. I see that. It was an act of loyalty, not a lapse of control." "Elias, no, it was a necessity. Your presence here is costing me my solitude. I came here to be invisible, and you're making me complicit. I realize the isolation I crave is being compromised by the secrets I am now sharing and the lies I tell to keep them." Silas, who had watched the exchange with quiet interest, cleared his throat. "The compass points to a spot not on the island, but under it. The old powder magazine. It's below the tower, below the high tide mark. It's locked up now. But a certain family," he nodded toward the door through which Mrs. Thorne had departed, "have the only key." Silas then slipped a heavy antique compass into Vera's hand. "Don't trust their key. Trust this. It's a magnetic compass set to point to the highest concentration of the old silver that Elara Vance hid. It will point you to the magazine." Back on the isle, the tension was a palpable thing. The ominous compass from Silas vibrated faintly in Vera's hand, guiding them not up the stairs but down into the forgotten depths of the lighthouse foundation. They used a set of master keys to access a rusted iron door hidden behind a supply cupboard. Beyond it lay a narrow, dirt-floored passage that smelled of stagnant water and moldering stone. "The old powder magazine," Elias confirmed, shining her powerful flashlight onto the walls. The stones were slick with moisture, and they had to move carefully to avoid pools of tidal water. It was sealed off decades ago. Too dangerous. The passage ended at a thick, iron-reinforced hatch set into the floor. The compass in Vera's hand began to glow faintly, humming with kinetic energy. "Vera, it's below the high water line. This is the cache. This is where Elara hid her treasure, the truth." As they worked to pry the hatch open, the sounds of the rising tide became deafening, echoing through the stone passage. Water was beginning to seep in, cold and fast. They were racing the ocean. "Elias, the tide's turned. We have maybe 5 minutes before this passage is flooded. The water level is already covering the lip. Vera, the hatch is heavy. Push." The secret she kept wasn't meant to be easy to find. It was meant to be protected. "Elias, protection is useless if we drown trying to get it. Pull. Now." They heaved together, their efforts strained and frantic. The heavy iron gave way with a groan of metal. The compass in Vera's hand flared bright white, and a powerful sense of heat rushed up from the opening. Below the hatch lay a small, dry, stone-lined chamber. In the center, on a raised slab, sat a simple, leather-wrapped object, a small iron ship's bell, covered in a thin, crystalline coating. The water continued to rise in the passage, but the chamber remained stubbornly dry. Vera scrambled down first, grabbing the bell. As she touched it, a wave of profound, ancient grief washed over her, staggering her. She gasped, clutching her chest. Elias. Vera. What is it? Vera. It's the bell, the vagrant's heart bell. And I can feel her despair. Ilara Vance. She saved the girl, but she lost her sister. Her ward wasn't just an orphan, she was her sister's daughter. And Ilara's betrayal, her choice, was sacrificing her first mate's life to keep the niece he wanted to ransom alive. But the rising water was critical. Elias realized the passage was almost impassable. Elias, we have to go. Now! She climbed down, grabbing Vera and pulling her toward the exit, sloshing through the calf-deep water. They scrambled out, sealing the hatch just as the main passage flooded. They leaned against the wall, soaked and panting. The bell is the artifact, Elias said, her voice strained. It's the only part of the ship that's real and solid. And it only worked. It only glowed when the tide was lowest and the magnetic field was strongest. The environmental condition. Vera nodded, holding the cold bell to her chest. The bell needs to be rung, or reconciled, under the exact conditions of her sinking. The next spring ebb tide, the night of the magnetic anomaly, the final appearance. The iron bell sat wrapped in velvet on the galley table, pulsing with a faint, internal light. Its presence dominated the lighthouse, turning the mechanical watchkeeping into a spiritual vigil. They spent the day before the next anomaly researching the family archives Vera carried, piecing together the final heartbreaking details of Captain Ilara Vance's choice. The first mate, Corvin, had not been a simple villain. He had been Ilara's longtime partner, professionally and romantically. He had discovered the true identity of the ward, Ilara's niece, and in a fit of bitterness and misplaced loyalty, intended to use her to force Ilara to abandon the dangerous life of privateering and marry him. Vera. The original betrayal wasn't about money. It was about control disguised as love. Corvin wanted to remove Ilara from the sea by forcing her hand. Ilara chose to sink the ship, to risk her life and his, to ensure her niece's freedom. She sacrificed her partner to uphold the principle of unconditional love for her sister's daughter. The curse was now clear. Ilara was eternally looking for absolution, forever seeking to know if her profound sacrifice was worth the ultimate cost. The ship was cursed not by divine punishment, but by an unfulfilled resolution. Elias had been listening in rigid silence, her hands clutching a hot mug of tea until her knuckles were white. She finally broke, her voice low and ragged, her gaze fixed on the endless sea outside the window. Elias, my accident, the thing that sent me here, was a drunk driver hitting my car. I was fine. My sister, she was in the passenger seat. She had been drinking too and had insisted I let her drive. I argued, I fought her. I should have insisted on driving, but I gave in because I was exhausted, because I didn't want to fight anymore. I gave her the keys. Elias. When the wreck happened, I wasn't hurt, but she died instantly. Everyone thought I was the victim, the survivor. But I knew the truth. I chose comfort over confrontation. I chose to avoid a fight, and it cost her everything. I was weak. I was a terrible keeper of her life. Vera walked over, not touching her, but standing as an anchor of empathy. Vera. Ilara Vance sacrificed her partner to protect a sister's child. You did not kill your sister, Elias. She made a choice, and you, exhausted and in a moment of weakness, allowed it. That is grief, not guilt. Ilara's sacrifice was monumental. Yours was a moment of human fatigue twisted by tragedy. Elias. But I could have done more. I could have been stronger. I ran here because I didn't want to risk failure again. Vera. And that's why the bell must be rung. Because it's not about strength, Elias. It's about forgiveness. You are trapped, just like that ship, in a moment of agonizing choice. Ilara needs to know the girl was safe. You need to know that your sister's memory is not a cage. We break Ilara's curse by finally accepting the true meaning of a tragic choice. As if in response to the emotional honesty, the bell on the table began to chime faintly, without being touched. The faint, impossible scent of carnations filled the room. The tide was dropping faster than predicted. The magnetic hum was returning. The final appearance of the ship was imminent. The storm raged with a fury that dwarfed the previous week's gale. The magnetic anomaly was spiking wildly, and the tide was dropping to an unprecedented low, the full force of the spring ebb tide. Elias and Vera stood in the lantern room, the iron bell in Vera's hand. There was no fear now, only absolute focused resolve. Elias. The ship is approaching. It's following the magnetic spike exactly. The light is holding steady. But this time I won't warn her off. Vera. Good. I'm going down to the lowest window. I need to be as close to the low water as possible. The bell needs to resonate with the exposed rock face, the place of the first failure. Elias. That window is unstable in a storm this severe. And if the ship passes through this close, the kinetic energy, even spectral, could shatter the glass. You'll be cut to pieces. Vera. The curse is an unfinished song. The bell is the final note. I have to risk it. You face your past with the light. I face mine with the sound. I'm going. Elias. No. If the window shatters, you'll be thrown into the rocks. I have the rope harness. I'm the keeper. I'm built for the physical risk. You have the knowledge. You stay up here and you guide me. I'll rappel down to the second-tier viewing platform. It's sturdier. That's where we make the attempt. Elias secured herself in the harness and descended the exterior maintenance ladder, the wind and rain immediately assaulting her. The vagrant's heart materialized with a startling clarity, closer, larger, and more solid than before. The ghostly Captain Ilara Vance was visible at the helm, her face a mask of silent anguish. Elias reached the small platform, clinging to the iron rail. Vera, watching from the high window, directed her through the headset. Vera, over headset, voice urgent. Elias, she's right on you. Now. The bell needs to be struck when the prow is level with the base. Do you have the small hammer? Elias. Got it. Tell me what to say. The spectral prow of the vagrant's heart loomed, a wave of impossible cold washing over Elias. She could see the faint figures of the ghostly crew on the deck, their eyes hollowed and fixed. Vera. Tell her the girl survived. Tell her the oath of love is complete. You are absolved. Elias yelled the words into the storm, the words feeling enormous and impossibly small against the roar of the sea. She struck the bell with the small hammer. Clang. The sound was not metallic. It was a deep, mournful singing note that cut through the storm. At that moment, the spectral Captain Ilara Vance at the helm turned her head fully toward Elias. Her ghostly face, for the first time, held a flicker of recognition, and the anguish was replaced by a look of peaceful acceptance. The ship did not vanish. Instead, the ghostly hull began to glow, a final, bright, ethereal white light. Then the vessel began to list sideways, slowly, silently, as if the water had suddenly become real. The light intensified, then, with a sound like a great, slow exhalation, the entire ship dissolved into a thick, swirling cloud of salt-scented mist. The mist rushed toward the tower, enveloping Elias. For a moment, she was overwhelmed by the smell of carnations and the faint sound of a woman weeping. But the weeping was a sound of relief, not despair. When the mist cleared, the sea was empty. The ghost ship was gone. The sea immediately calmed. The wind dropped to a mere whisper, and the intense magnetic anomaly vanished. But the lighthouse beam, Elias's constant, reliable light, extinguished itself completely. The light was dead. Silence. The light was out. The storm was over. Elias, drenched and shivering, was hauled back up by Vera. They stood in the lantern room, now dark and silent, the massive Fresnel lens reflecting only the pale, nascent light of the dawn. The bell sat on the desk, its glow completely gone, just a cold piece of iron. Vera, she's at rest. The ship is gone. We broke the curse. Elias, and I killed the light. Elias pointed at the darkened lens, her voice devoid of panic, only of finality. This is the cost of interfering with the sea. The keeper's duty is light. I failed. Vera, no. The light went out because its job was done. It wasn't guiding ships, it was guiding a soul home. You didn't fail, Elias. You completed the mission of this tower. Vera reached out and placed a hand gently on Elias's wet shoulder. What happens now? Elias looked at the magnificent, silent lens. She no longer saw a prison or a shield. She saw the empty space where the light used to be, and she realized the true source of her isolation wasn't the tower. It was the guilt she brought inside. Elias, the Coast Guard will send a relief crew and an inspection team. I'll report the incident, the failure, and I'll take the consequences. I won't lie this time. I am done hiding. Vera nodded, understanding. And then? Elias looked out at the tranquil, empty sea, then turned to Vera. Elias, then I leave. This place has served its purpose. It forced me to face a ghost, both hers and mine. I can't hide anymore. Not from life and not from the risk of living it. Vera, I'll come with you. My mission is complete too. The vagrant's heart found peace. My ancestor is absolved. I don't need the legend anymore. I just need the next horizon. Elias, a new journey then. A risk. Vera, the best kind. Later that morning, before the Coast Guard vessel arrived, they carried the ship's bell down to the foundation. In the now dry powder magazine, they placed it gently back onto the slab. Elias paused, looking up at the majestic, silent, dark tower one last time. She placed a small, polished brass key, the key to the lantern room, on the weathered wooden railing. It was a symbol of her released burden. They stepped onto the supply boat, turning their backs on the Isle of the Lost Light. As the boat pulled away, Elias watched the sunrise hit the cold glass of the lens. The lighthouse was dark, but for the first time in years, the light within Elias was beginning to return. Vera, where to next, Keeper? Elias, the open sea, Vera, where the light is just another choice.